From herein marks the launch of AMD's RX 5600 XT, which is coming out with a shelf price starting from $279 USD, or in Australia starting from 499 AUD. We're going to talk about the pricing a little bit later because it is very important to weigh up into this review, especially since the RTX 2060, AMD's closest competitor, has dropped their price from $350 to now $299, marking only a $20 difference in MSRP, and even then, these cards can already be had on the streets for that price. That being said, this newest installment has the same amount of stream processors as the RX 5700. However, it differs in one major factor, and that is the bandwidth of the memory has been cut down from 256-bit to 192, and then the memory has also been dropped from 8 GB of VRAM of GDDR6 to 6 GB. Though you guys are probably wondering, will that make much of a difference? We'll roll those 1080p and also 1440p benchmarks very soon for you. However, that being said, I'm going to put this out there straight away. There is going to be a lot of controversy surrounding this launch, especially since what the model we've got here, the ASUS TUF Gaming, I got this in a few days ago. However, this morning I got a vBios update for this card, which changed the performance, so I had to rerun all my performance numbers. Though what I'm going to deliver for you guys now is 3 different sets of numbers for this card. That is one set with before the update, which saw the max core clock speeds going to 1650, and also the memory sitting at 1500 megahertz, which is pumped by 8 times to get your effective speeds. And then also we've got the overclocked numbers, which I managed to get the memory up to around 1760 megahertz, and then on the core that went up to 1820 max. So that's the BIOS limit, which actually has the same limits in place of 1860 on the memory and 1820 on the core, and that was implemented on the same both the BIOSes before and after. So the max overclocking potential on this card hasn't been changed. However, the most important factor to come out of today is the numbers you're seeing here will differ, and I know this for a fact from other reviewers, especially those who got the Sapphire Pulse edition, and that got a memory boost of 1500 megahertz to 1750 megahertz, making it effectively the same memory speeds as an RX 5700. Though the core clock on this model went up 130 megahertz, same as the Sapphire Pulse. However, what you're most likely going to see is that my overclock numbers in today's benchmarks will be pretty much similar to a lot of those Sapphire Pulse numbers, where after these limits on my OC, I didn't get a whole lot more performance. Though with that aside, let's roll those benchmarks for you guys and then come back with all the nitty gritty with this model right here. So what we're seeing with these numbers with the 5600 XT is it's pretty much trading blows with the RTX 2060 at both 1080p and 1440p. The RX 5700 does start to stretch its legs at 1440p, and we can see this with the worst case scenario of the RX 5700 being about 5.5% faster than this 5600 XT we've got here, and then the best case scenario being 22% in Strange Brigade at 1440p. When we contrast that to the RTX 2060, we saw the RX 5700 win out in Fortnite at 1440p by 5.6%. Then the worst case scenario was it lost by about 17% in Strange Brigade at 1080p to the RTX 2060. So basically, depending on what you're seeing, the RX 5600 XT can beat out the RTX 2060 and vice versa, depending on the title you're playing. But universally here, the RX 5700 did pull ahead of this 5600 XT, even when it was overclocked. Though looking at those overclocked numbers a little bit more, I was actually really impressed when I first got this card in, because it's the first time that I'd seen an AMD card in a long time have a good amount of headroom with the included air cooler. You were getting over a 10% performance increase by clicking a few sliders, and not only that, the power consumption was also still really good and well under control. Where out of the box before and after the vBios update, it was actually really impressive, and then even after overclocking, it was still in good numbers, running really cool. And this model in particular, the 5600 XT TUF Gaming, when I did the test, I was really impressed. ASUS have had some backfire regarding their 5700 XT TUF Gaming and also their 5700 XT Strix series, where on the TUF Gaming they originally didn't even put any memory cooling on board, I believe. However, this model here does have memory cooling on board, and that allowed it to get temperatures under 60 degrees on the GPU core, and the memory also remained under 80 degrees even whilst it was overclocked. And then the VRM temperatures were also under 60 degrees in all three different scenarios, even when I overclocked it. And this was leaving it on auto fan speeds, which kept the noises really well under control. So there was no need to manually change the fan speeds. And the best thing about this model in particular was that I was testing it in 28C ambience, which is pretty hot compared to what some other people show their testing results in. Though looking closer at this model in particular, you've got 3 DisplayPort outs as well as an HDMI out at the back. You've got a aluminium backplate, as well as a cooler in total that weighs in at 1.04 kilograms, with the 2 outer fans being 90 mil and the inner fan being 75 mil in diameter. We've also got a length of 280 mil long and 54 millimeters tall, so making it a 2.5 slot cooler, and then 116 millimeters wide, meaning that ASUS are using a custom PCB for this 5600 XT, which differs from the reference design of, I believe, 100 mil. And the last good piece of news is that this model only requires a single 8-pin adapter. It does have LED lights to tell you if the PCIe connector is plugged in properly. There's also a white LED light on top that's not RGB from my knowledge, because I wasn't provided any software to change it, or I wasn't told of anything in regards to that. And apparently there is a dual BIOS with this model, though you need to get an exe file to change it into a different BIOS. So there's actually no manual switch included, which does confuse me a little bit, because removing that switch does in ways defeat the whole purpose of having a dual BIOS. And with all that out of the way, it's time to give you guys my opinion on what I think of the 5600 XT right here. Is it a good buy? If it is a good buy, who's it going to be a good buy for? And with its MSRP, this is what I've heard, the $279 is going to be for the non-OC models. So that's basically going to be for the models that you saw with the graphs today of the before the vBios update. And if the box has an OC model on it, then it's going to command a slightly higher price. The Sapphire Pulse, I heard, is going to come in at 289 MSRP USD, in Australia about 500 AUD. In terms of this ASUS TUF Gaming right here, I don't even know how much this thing's going to cost, but ASUS cards usually command a bit of a premium over MSRP as well. And then we've got the RTX 2060 beside it, which I already picked up a few of these on an eBay sale for 420 Aussie dollars. So that's coming in at $80 cheaper than the MSRP of the 5600 XT. And when we look at the prices online now for a 5700, you can get them off Amazon for 320 US. And in Australia, you can get a 5700 now, just buy it now for 530 AUD. So for an extra 30 USD, or if you're in Australia, an extra 30 Aussie dollars too, I would actually go for the 5700 over the 5600 XT at these current prices in this current market, because that 2 gigabytes of VRAM is going to be useful, especially in the future, and especially for a resale, for example, and also for the performance right now at 1080p and 1440p. And we didn't even overclock the 5700, because the main focus for me was these two cards on the table here, RTX 2060 and also the 5600 XT. So basically, as we saw with those market rates, I can really only base my opinion on market rates because that's what you're going to be buying the card for. And so I feel like with the 5600 XT, if it came out and it had a street price of around 260 USD, it would be really good value for money. I feel like with the 5700 coming under that 350 price point for what you can actually pick it up for, and the RTX 2060 now coming at that advertised MSRP, it makes a really tough market for the 5600 XT to stand out. Just like the 5500 XT, you guys said the price needs to drop by about $20. I feel the same needs to happen here with this card, at least as we said before, based on those prices that you can currently buy GPUs for. Though that aside, there's also another curveball to talk about, and that's with this vBios update. Coming back to that, apparently the whole first batch of shipments with the 5600 XTs, all different models, will have that original vBios. So you will have to update that vBios if you buy this card to get the extra performance. And if you buy a model like the TUF Gaming, then you're most likely going to want to overclock the memory speeds to get the most out of it. So when it all comes down to it, the competitors responded, the market has responded, but now I want you guys to respond in the comments section below as well and let us know what you think about the 5600 XT and all things graphics cards. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. And speaking of thoughts and opinions, we have the question of the day, which comes from Iznok Kamote. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, but the question's really good. It relates to what's the standard thickness of the thermal pad that was used to replace the old one from the motherboard? Any idea about thickness of the thermal pad that's being used on GPUs? And this is related to the previous video I did with Can Yes Fix It. I'll put the link up here for you guys, where I replaced some thermal pads on a motherboard. And basically when it comes to thickness of thermal pads, they differ from all sorts of manufacturers to products, especially with tech. You can go from 0.5 mil to 1 mil to 2 mil. They're usually the standard sizes that manufacturers use, though I have seen some manufacturers use 0.3 mil as well. So if you are dealing with a lot of used parts and you're changing thermal pads, I would recommend buying all 4 sizes, where the pads themselves only generally cost around $1 or $2 for quite a large pad, which will last a number of changes. So for me personally, I've got all different sizes on hand, and you don't want to put the wrong size on that product. For instance, if you've got a GPU that uses 1mm pads and you put 2mm pads on, then you could risk the GPU not contacting the cooler properly, and that could make temperatures a lot hotter than normal. Or if you put too small of a thermal pad on, then you could risk that memory not being cooled. So you definitely want to match the size of the thermal pad you're replacing, but there's generally 4 different standard sizes used. I'll put some links in the description below for you guys anyway, if you want to check that out. And with that aside, I hope you guys enjoyed today's review of the 5600 XT. I tried to cover all bases for you, and I hope I did. And if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to hit that like button. And also, if you stayed this far and you're enjoying the content and you're not yet subbed, sub button's down there, ring that bell to get the content as soon as it drops around here at Tech Yes City. And I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.